This boy was seen as a loser by everyone at school, but one day, everything changed. He couldn't believe all the power he had now. His body was so strong that he was afraid he might go bald. He broke the record in the running test and did the same in the push-up exam. For the weightlifting test, there simply wasn't enough weight for him to use. All the students were watching, completely terrified. This was the boy they used to bully. He hadn't always been this strong. If only they had known, they would never have messed with him. But the truth is, things used to be very different. This boy was the only one who failed the advancement exam. While the whole class celebrated their success, Kannagi Minato felt an inexplicable emptiness. It was the third time he had failed. He was the student who stayed behind to clean the classroom. This lonely moment almost made him cry, realizing how useless he felt. One of his classmates said that all the students had to go to the school entrance. The reason was that a man named Isaac Kaise, a Class A hunter, had returned. He was once a student at this school before becoming a famous hunter. He was there to film a documentary about how he had been a great student before becoming famous. But the truth that wasn't shown to the cameras was this. Isaac Kaise was a horrible person who used to beat Minato every day for no reason. Remembering that guy made our protagonist tremble, but what Isaac Kaise told the cameras was that Minato was a great friend who always helped him when they studied together, even with money, since Minato's family was poor. Those lies were only meant to make Kaise look even better on camera. And since Minato didn't have the courage to speak up, he simply agreed with Isaac's words. While the reporters took pictures, Minato felt those memories burn in his mind. He truly hated that man. After the filming ended, our protagonist felt the emptiness of being weak, of not having the power to do anything. When he was younger, Minato loved reading books that told stories about the legendary founders who saved the world. When the Tower of Malevolence appeared and nearly destroyed humanity with the monsters that came out of it, incredible people rose up and saved the world. They were all amazing. One man defeated 10,000 soldiers using only a wooden stick. It could easily have been just a pencil. There was also a mage so powerful that she could cast spells without saying a single
Awakened, Hanada impulsively threw a quick kick. Even with an almost effortless movement, the man simply lowered his head, spat out the water in his mouth, and walked away. He didn't even look back. He ignored Hanada's silly morning prank, saying he had no patience for that kind of thing so early, and that he was heading to the cafeteria first. Hanada was left in disbelief. He realized that his attack had been faster than yesterday, yet it had been deflected so easily. Moments later, in the cafeteria, Hanada saw a good place to sit and walked over to a woman who was eating some fruit. He asked if she minded them joining her, and she gave a short, brusque nod of approval. Hanada took the chance, sat in front of her, and gestured for the man to sit beside him. Then he recognized her. She was one of Hanada's comrades from yesterday, but she still seemed distant. She spoke to him formally, making it clear she didn't really want him there. Even so, he greeted her and introduced himself. Her indifference was immediate. She wasn't interested in learning his name, and certainly didn't plan to remember it. She even lifted her fork, pointed it at him, and declared that she would only recognize his name when she deemed him worthy. Until then, training was the priority. He would have to accompany her on a mission to dispel a prophecy. This prophecy dated back to 1945, when people found the first book of prophecies buried beneath the Antarctic ice, 3,000 meters deep. They called it the Book of Destruction. The writing was crude, almost like a child's scribbles, but it predicted a catastrophic future. It said that 80 years later, the world would face a devastating attack and a series of apocalyptic disasters. The words were so heavy that everyone took them seriously. Later, while they were driving, she asked whether the world believed in the book's dark predictions. He thought for a moment, then looked at her, still not knowing her name. But before he could ask, she said there was no need for introductions. She only wanted his answer. He believed the prophecies had to be accurate, but she reacted immediately. She mocked his answer, practically questioning his intelligence. She said that if even one thing from the Book of Destruction came true, the world would end. That revelation left him stunned. As they continued talking, he turned to Hanada and asked how many prophecies had actually been recorded. Hanada guessed around 200, and that left him speechless. He couldn't help but wonder if the world was already beyond saving. But Midori assured him, saying they had already prevented almost 180 of those prophecies, which completely amazed him. Still trying to grasp everything, he asked again why the world believed so much in the book. The woman explained that an explorer named Bernard Russell found the Book of Destruction. As soon as Bernard opened it, the first page read, "Hello, Bernard," followed by a precise timestamp. March 17, 1945, at 11:35 a.m., on a sunny day, the exact moment he discovered it. That terrifying accuracy left no room for doubt. Hours later, they arrived at their destination, the Sumida district in Tokyo. An intermediate-level dimensional rift had opened there. As they approached, the guards blocked their way, firmly stating that the area was off-limits. But they simply ignored the warnings, passed the guards with incredible speed, and left them momentarily confused. He hesitated, wondering if it was really right to continue, but Hanada quickly reassured him that it was. The woman then began explaining the major crisis they were facing. She said that huge problems like World War III, the dark side of the moon, an invasive pandemic, and floating trees were all considered emergencies. Among them, the outbreak of pandemonium, which Hanada managed to stop, was especially serious. Although the Book of Destruction was well known, it was only one among many magical books scattered around the world. The job of the Anti-Prophecy Unit was to gather information, analyze predictions, and act before things happened. She then went over the different threat levels they faced. A level 3, for example, meant one or more regions being destroyed. Level 2 was a national emergency, while Level 1 affected the planet's environment as a whole. Then there was a special level reserved for when the world itself was on the brink of destruction. He listened carefully, and upon realizing the severity of everything, he became alarmed. He quickly asked whether these missions now depended entirely on them. The woman didn't hesitate. She confirmed that yes, these responsibilities came with being part of the anti-prophecy unit. Shortly after, Zarek and his team spotted them crossing the caution line and immediately confronted them. Kisaraj, thinking they were just civilians, warned them to turn back, explaining how dangerous the area was. But she ignored his concerns, stating that today's prophecy was a Level 3 event. The dimensional fissure ahead looked like a B-class intermediate anomaly, but it was actually a far greater threat, a Level 3 disaster codenamed Yellow Journal. She was sure its hardness level would rise, and almost on cue, it began to widen at an alarming rate. Kisaraj turned, his eyes wide with horror, as the rift fully opened. Then a wave of creatures began to emerge, each one more monstrous than the previous one. He commanded his team sharply to prepare for battle, but the response was immediate and brutal. The creatures overwhelmed his forces within seconds, knocking them down with little resistance. Panic set in, and he cursed under his breath when he realized that even B and C-ranked hunters were struggling to stand on their feet. Then his attention shifted to something even more dangerous, the immense pressure coming from a boss-level monster. As he watched the newcomers advance, Kisaraj tried to intervene once more, warning them to fall back. But before he could say anything else, the woman pressed her hand to the ground and cast a spell called Trismegistos. Instantly, spears burst from the earth, impaling the creatures in a swift and merciless strike. Their bodies collapsed lifelessly as blood pooled around them. Hanada launched his own attack as well. He moved forward with incredible speed, gliding fluidly across the battlefield and taking down every enemy in his path with precise, calculated movements. Kisaraj watched everything speechless. He had always believed himself to be formidable as an S-ranked hunter, but these people were clearly far beyond him. He simply couldn't figure out who they were or where they had come from. Then the woman turned to Kisaraj and without hesitation told him to retreat. As far as they were concerned, he was just a civilian in this situation. Kisaraj's eyes dropped to his hand, where he saw an emblem imprinted on his skin. Recognition spread across his face. He realized they weren't there by coincidence. They were government agents. Before he could fully process what that meant, a massive hand burst from the dimensional rift, tearing it open even further. As the fissure widened, an imposing beast emerged. It was a De Leon, a being far beyond S-rank, towering over them, its monstrous form radiating an overwhelming presence. Without hesitation, the woman charged forward, ready to strike. Kisaraj shouted, warning her not to be reckless, but she ignored his concerns. Together, they launched their attack, completely unfazed by the threat before them. Hanada quickly began striking the beastman with a rapid series of kicks, only to realize in shock that his attacks had no effect. The creature's anti-physical armor rendered his blows useless, forcing him to retreat just as the monster lunged toward the woman. Without a moment's hesitation, she began gathering energy in front of her, preparing to counterattack. But before she could respond, Kannagi suddenly appeared between them. He halted the beastman's strike using nothing but his bare hand. The impact caused the beastman to erupt in a burst of energy, stunning everyone for a moment. When the dust settled, Hanada recognized the attack. It was a penetration strike. What truly surprised him, however, was that Kannagi had taken down an S-rank monster with a single blow. He realized that Kannagi's strength had increased dramatically overnight. Even though the woman claimed that kind of power wasn't necessary, he knew that when facing an enemy with high physical resistance, attacking from the inside was the most effective tactic. He had learned this from Antak, the fist saint, who had taught him the basics of penetration attacks the previous night. After that, Kannagi turned to the girl and asked her name, saying that since she had saved him, he at least deserved to know. She replied cheerfully that her name was Ai. There was no time to think. Hanada rushed back toward the battlefield, preparing to face the new wave of monsters emerging from the rift. The woman didn't hesitate. She unleashed her own attack, drenching her enemies in liquid mercury, then igniting it in a powerful explosion with her skill, Mercurius Reject. Together they pressed forward, realizing Kannagi had been right. Shattering their enemies from within was proving far more effective. Determined to continue, she signaled to Hanada. Without hesitation, the two of them headed straight for the dimensional rift, while Kisaraj could only watch in disbelief from behind. He knew that the world beyond the rift was something entirely different, a realm unknown, filled with unimaginable dangers. Entering it was pure madness. Before he could react, they had already leapt forward, diving through the rift without a second thought. Kisaraj stood there, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of A-class monsters. Then it hit him. These two weren't ordinary fighters. They had to be part of that rumored secret organization. The moment they entered the dimension, an overwhelming swarm of creatures awaited them. A quickly assessed the situation. Noticing that the monsters were identical to those outside, she raised her hand with perfect precision and conjured a barrage of mercury spears, instantly impaling the creatures. Kannagi, still running, watched her technique and recognized her immense power. He finally understood why she was considered the strongest area of effect fighter within the anti-prophecy unit. After defeating the remaining enemies, A now stood before an enormous bear-type monster. Just as she prepared to strike, however, Hanada leapt toward it first. The bear saw him, and the bear swung its claws, but Hanada dodged by leaping onto the roof. He then followed up with a barrage of kicks around the beast. Kannagi watched in amazement as Hanada moved so effortlessly, laughing the whole time. But then, to his shock, Kannagi suddenly rushed toward the bear and unleashed a flurry of kicks, exactly like Hanada had done. He even asked Hanada if it looked similar to his technique. Hanada was surprised, but he couldn't help smiling in admiration. Once they defeated the monster, they pushed forward. A noticed that the farther they went, the fewer enemies they encountered. Eventually, they reached a large open area that resembled an arena. Suddenly, they felt an aura surrounding them and knew something was coming. Then, to their shock, an enormous, enraged warrior minotaur leapt out in front of them. It wasn't just any minotaur. This was a blind boss with triple S-rank power. Hanada and Kannagi were stunned by its massive size, but A simply stood there indifferently, wondering if this really was the boss. Then a rain of spears shot out from the portal behind it. A shouted for the others to attack with everything they had, saying that she would deal with whatever came next. Hearing this, Hanada began to channel his energy, while Kannagi stood in the back, impressed by both of them. But deep down, he knew their strength probably wouldn't be enough to defeat the beast. When Hanada heard him say that, he was shocked that Kannagi doubted their strongest attacks. Even with their barrage of magic, the beast simply swung its massive weapon, created a crater in the ground, and sent powerful shockwaves through the arena. When the dust settled, they were stunned. The creature was completely unscathed. Even after all their powerful blows, the group prepared to attack again. When Kannagi readied himself, he suddenly heard someone praising A's talent. He recognized the voice. It was Kilik, the spirit of his founder. Kilik is an alchemist who was worried that A, with all her purity, agility, and incredible strength, might waste her talent by dying so young in this fight. Kilik said that A had done her best, but this minotaur existed on a completely different level of power. She had underestimated the monster's physical resistance, which was at a full 100%. Growing more concerned, Kannagi asked what he should do, but Kilik only laughed. Meanwhile, Hanada and A were genuinely struggling against the beast. They realized they should have brought someone skilled in magic. When A looked toward Kannagi, she was stunned by the strange energy emanating from his body. Kannagi had surrendered control of his body to Kilik, who then cast his powerful spell, Mercurius, directly at the beast's legs. The spell froze the lower half of its body, leaving A completely astonished. She was shocked not only because Kannagi used the same type of ability she did, but also because he used it in a way that completely immobilized the monster. Killick, still controlling Kannagi's body, glared seriously at A and called her a fool. He scolded her for not being flexible enough with her expertise, saying that she still needed to learn how to control substances in 3 different forms to truly become an alchemist. As Killick spoke, he simultaneously filled the Minotaur's entire body with mercury. As the liquid metal began to spill from the monster's mouth, he cast a boiling spell. The mercury inside the beast heated rapidly, boiling from within, and its toxic vapors spread throughout the arena, making it difficult for the others to breathe. A watched in awe, realizing that Killick hadn't used brute strength at all. He had used extreme temperatures to bring the monster down. While the Minotaur writhed in agony, its body overheated from the inside. While casting the spell, Killick casually told Kannagi that he wanted to make A his disciple. Kannagi, however, brushed it off as a joke. Eventually, the boiling mercury overwhelmed the Minotaur, reducing it to an inert heap on the ground. And just like that, the day's mission, defeating the boss, classified as a level 3 prophecy, ended in victory. A watched in disbelief, unable to comprehend what she had just seen. Kannagi had used an ability that should only be possible for an awakened being living inside a crest. She knew he had to be in the same class as Rico, yet he had managed to use alchemy at her level. Still shocked, she demanded to know who Kannagi really was. With a confident smile, Kannagi extended his hand and introduced himself. A, though irritated yet intrigued, reluctantly shook his hand, saying that she would definitely remember him. Hinata smiled happily, seeing Kannagi finally receive recognition from A. Meanwhile, Kisaraj and his men were still waiting outside. To their shock, the dimensional rift began to close. Just as it was about to seal completely, the trio leapt out in time. Kannagi asked if the mission was officially over and was informed that they simply needed to report back to headquarters. As they discussed what to do, Kisaraj approached them, thanking them for saving his team. He promised he wouldn't try to uncover their identities or... He couldn't explain what had happened inside. He thanked them for understanding and suggested that they include details about the emblem in their report. That would explain everything to the authorities. As the trio started to walk away, Zarate offered his help in case they ever got into trouble. But A turned back and said they would probably never meet again, telling him he should return to his normal life. Hearing this, Kisaraj realized that in the end, they were just civilians, people living in a world he could never reach. On May 11th, a red flash streaked across the streets of the Yong province village. A guard spotted it, but was completely perplexed, unable to identify what it was. Then, suddenly, a deafening boom tore through the sky above the village. Back at the Anti-Prophecy HQ, the trio stepped out of the car, and Kaus reminded them they still needed to write their report for headquarters. But then Renata received a message on his phone. They were being summoned to the laboratory. This was highly unusual, especially right after a mission. Curious, they headed to the Anti-Prophecy headquarters lab where 2 people were already waiting. One person stood on a stage, the other sat in the stands. Then, in a truly authoritative voice, someone remarked that Kenny had taken too long to deal with a level 3 disaster. Kannagi recognized him immediately. It was the red-haired man from before. A, however, was furious at his condescending attitude. She was irritated that he acted like the leader when he wasn't. Hinata quickly intervened to calm things down, asking what Director Kurihara needed. It turned out that the man on the stage was the director himself. Once everyone settled, he displayed a video sent by the analysis team. The video showed a glowing piece of charcoal, which the director explained was a prophecy grimoire. They had found it in a volcanic region. It had been analyzing it ever since. Ken wondered if it was even possible to read a grimoire in that damaged state, but the director, adjusting his glasses, revealed that they had extracted some information using AI technology and X-rays, although its full meaning was still unclear. What they had managed to decipher was a prophecy that clearly mentioned Japan. Everyone in the room was shocked, especially Ken, because this was a new prophecy they had never encountered before. The director continued and explained that anti-prophecy research was extremely advanced, gathering information from all over the world. Finding an unknown prophecy like this was highly unusual, but this situation was different. The red-haired man understood immediately. The four of them needed to investigate. The director praised his intuition and explained that this mission would normally go to the regular members, but they were currently unavailable. Hearing this, Kannagi realized this must be why Midori wasn't present when they returned. The director then ordered them to depart immediately, promising more details by email. Kannagi was surprised they were receiving another mission so quickly, but the red-haired man simply told him he would get used to it. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Kannagi clenched his fists as a frightening thought crossed his mind. This time, the fate of the world might truly be at stake. Su slammed his hand on the table and stood up. In a firm, authoritative tone, he announced that he and his 3 subordinates accepted the mission. Ken was clearly irritated. He was acting like the boss again. As they left, the director gave them one final warning. He told them to be cautious, as they still didn't know how severe this mission would be. He also reminded them that even if the prophecy began to unfold, they would have to wait for the main force before taking action. In the car, Kannagi felt uneasy about all the unknown dangers of the mission. In the front seat, Su suggested they rest for a while. He noted that Kannagi had just completed his first mission, but A, driven by pride, refused. She insisted that he had no right to give her orders. Surprisingly, however, both Raneda and Kannagi accepted the offer immediately and fell asleep within moments. Su was determined to stay awake and fought off the fatigue, but as the night went on, exhaustion eventually overtook her as well. Sometime later, the car stopped. A woke up and realized the vehicle was empty. Alarmed, she ran outside and found the others standing on a cliff, staring at a bright light below them. What she saw left her in complete disbelief. An enormous magic circle spread across the ground on a scale far beyond anything they had imagined. Raneda quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. It was far worse than they expected. The prophecy was almost complete. Skeletal figures were emerging from the ground, still trapped within massive crystals. Their eerie glow cast an ominous light across the entire area. A chill ran down their spines as they realized they might already be too late. These skeletons were the 23 villagers mentioned in the report. Su recalled a similar incident from the past. 30 years ago, the Wakayama mansion had mysteriously vanished, and a dimensional rift had nearly opened. As he explained this, the enormous pillar at the center of the magic circle began erupting with bursts of energy. Noticing this, the explosion urged them to move quickly. Haneda drew his sword and asked what they should do. Su revealed that they had to stop. A quickly reminded them of the director's orders. They had been instructed to wait for further commands. But before they could discuss it, they felt a massive aura behind them. When they turned around, they saw Kannagi covered in an overwhelming energy, ready to fight. The group immediately noticed that Kannagi seemed much stronger than before. Even so, Su remained unfazed. He simply smiled, stepped forward, and told the others to follow him. They all ran after him, though A warned him not to act so recklessly. As they descended toward the magic circle, Rinak and the mage suddenly caught a scent in the air. It seemed strangely familiar, an aroma they had encountered many times in their lives. The ground shook violently, and with an explosion, a massive hand burst out from underground. Hinoke's eyes widened in shock. He now knew exactly what they were smelling. It was the scent of a forbidden technique, the very prophecy written in the Book of Scorching Heat. Hinoke explained that long ago, during the A period, an awakener named Bando Shidima, leader of the Black Magus, committed genocide. The Onmyo-jigais eventually killed him, but an entire village had been caught in the chaos. Shidima collected the blood of the fallen villagers and used it to draw a magic circle, ensuring he would be reborn 1,000 years later. His goal was to devour everyone and rule the world as a demon king. Before dying, he left behind a forbidden technique showing how living beings would be sacrificed for his resurrection. Now, in the present, Shidima had reincarnated as a boss whose rank no one knew. His mission was clear: to fulfill the prophecy of the scorching heat. He looked at his hands and grimaced, realizing he had returned with far less power than expected. He wondered whether there had not been enough sacrifices for the ritual. As he looked around, he noted with amusement that even after 1,000 years, the place had not changed at all. But his lips curled into a maniacal smile when he saw the anti-prophecy unit approaching. To him, they were merely more sacrifices. Channeling his dark arts, he unleashed the yin plate, causing a massive explosion directly beneath the charging anti-prophecy unit. Kannagi became alarmed as the blast engulfed Hanada and Kane, but they were unharmed once the dust had settled. Then his expression darkened as he saw a dark magic circle appear where they had landed. It was the dark art of the realm of death. Hundreds of spirits emerged from the circle, extending their ghostly hands to seize Hanada and Kane. They fought them off, quickly realizing that Shidima was far more skilled than they had expected. As Shidima watched his spell take effect, he suddenly sensed something behind him. It was Kannagi attacking from surprise. Shidima dodged effortlessly, bending and slipping past the strike without any effort. Smirking, he called Kannagi an amateur, and then launched another yin plate directly beneath him. The explosion erupted, but to Shidima's surprise, Kannagi was unharmed. Kannagi counterattacked with his thunderbolt-ad ability, but Shidima blocked it with his own dark magic. Even though he stopped the attack, Shidima was impressed by Kannagi's choice of technique. Through the smoke, Su approached from behind Shidima and used his spell Chrysanthemum, launching a barrage of sharp knives toward him. Shidima was startled, but dodged by leaping into the air. While he was airborne, Su cast another spell, having already expected that such a weak attack wouldn't bring him down. Su struck his weapon against the ground and used his ability, causing knives to rain from the sky. But Shidima simply smiled, calling it a mere rain of lights. Then he transformed his hand into a shield to block the attack, though the recoil was significant. After blocking, Shidima realized that Su was probably the strongest among them. Kannagi, watching from the side, thought that Shidima's power was limitless, completely different from any enemy they had ever faced. Shidima himself seemed even stronger than the founders. As Kannagi thought this, he heard his friends shouting from behind. He turned and was shocked to see Kane and Hanada being struck by dark art abilities. They managed to evade the attack and began charging toward Shidima, who was still locked in battle with Su. As they closed in, Shidima summoned 3 skeletal demons to deal with Kane and Hanada. Hanada saw one demon appear right in front of him and kicked it, but to his surprise, it did absolutely nothing. The bodies of these monsters were as tough as the minotaurs they had faced before. As Shidima and Su continued exchanging blow after blow, one of the skeletal demons stood directly in front of Kannagi, blocking his path. Shidima even mocked Su, declaring that he would receive no help from his friends. But immediately after Shidima said that, Su struck him directly in the shoulder. "I don't need help," he declared. Then he pointed at Shidima. "Stay back. I trust only my own strength." Shidima simply wiped the blood from his wound and began screaming like a madman, shouting that he didn't need anyone either, and that he would devour them all. With that, he charged straight at Su, who barely managed to block the attack just a few centimeters from his body. As Su struggled to withstand Shidima's relentless assault, he heard someone calling his name from behind. It was Kannagi, running directly at Shidima. Shidima was surprised to see Kannagi, especially because he had already sent a demon to stop him. He quickly looked back and saw the others still fighting their demons, but the one he had sent after Kannagi was sliced clean in half. Even Su was impressed by the attack. Kannagi then suggested that they should fight together to defeat Shidima. Su was shocked for a moment. Kane and Akon hadn't even defeated their own opponents yet, but this guy had already done so, and now he was offering help. But Su's pride was stronger. He completely rejected Kannag's offer, declaring, "I don't need anyone's help. I'm more than enough to fight alone." Kannagi couldn't believe it, but before they could argue further, Shidima suddenly approached. He released his technique, Magatsu's breath, and a powerful beam was fired directly at the two of them. Su managed to block, but Kannagi was thrown back, his body struck hard by the devastating blast. He slammed into a tree, and his vision began to blur as he started to lose consciousness. As he drifted into unconsciousness, he saw Hinoke and the Major Spirit standing right in front of him. Hinoke told him that he had fainted, which is why they had summoned him into his own consciousness. Even with his body bruised, battered, and tortured by pain, Kannagi tried to stand, desperately asking them to send him back. He had to fight. But before they could reply, a deep and authoritative voice echoed through the space, ordering him to step back. Meanwhile, outside, Su struggled to defend against Shidima's relentless attacks. Shidima smiled, even praising Su for thinking like him, believing that neither of them needed anyone else in battle. With a sinister grin and his insatiable desire to devour everything, he put all his power into his next strike. He struck with such force that Su's sword shattered in half. Although stunned, Su quickly summoned another blade and swung it at Shidima. But Shidima dodged effortlessly, bending backward with almost supernatural flexibility. Shidima clearly seemed to be enjoying himself more and more as Su continued fighting. Meanwhile, back in the spiritual realm, Kannagi's spirit form watched the battle unfold. They all knew that Shidima was stronger than anyone present. Hinoke told Kannagi that this situation was far beyond anything he could give him, and the mage added that Shidima's precision was terrifyingly high. If more humans had been living in that place, Shidima could have already become a demon king. She warned Kannagi that if Shidima took his life as well, it would make him even stronger and wreak havoc on civilization. She even said that the discovery of the Grimorium had been nothing but coincidence. Then Hinak stepped forward, asking Kannagi to lend them his body so they could take care of this. But to their complete surprise, Kannagi refused outright. He apologized, but firmly said, "This isn't training, this is real." He explained that he had to overcome this obstacle on his own, just as he would have to overcome things in the future. Filled with confidence and determination, he looked at them and asked if they agreed. The mage tried to argue, but Hinak interrupted. He told Kannagi, "You've already surpassed us." Hinak placed a hand on Kannagi's shoulder, reminding him of his vow to overcome the founders. Then he encouraged Kannagi to go, use everything he had learned, and do things his own way. This greatly boosted Kannagi's confidence. With a determined expression, he faced the battlefield and asked the founders to watch over him. Without hesitating for even a moment, he ran toward the field where Shidima and Sue were still fighting fiercely. Sui looked battered and exhausted. As soon as he opened his eyes, Shidima attacked again, sending him flying through the air. While Sui was still airborne, Shidima prepared the finishing blow to end him. But just as Sui braced for impact, someone grabbed him mid-air. Kannagi had caught both Sui and his sword. Still in the air, he quickly borrowed Sui's sword and with swift movement hurled Sui toward the ground, away from the range of Shidima's magic beam. Sui crashed into the ground hard, and Shidima immediately shifted his attention to Kannagi, who remained suspended in the air. Shidima fired another Magatsu's breath directly at him, but was shocked. Kannagi was calmly using Hinak's one-handed sword style. With razor-sharp focus, Kannagi sliced straight through Shidima's breath attack, cutting it cleanly in half. Then with precise control, he struck Shidima's arm, severing it completely from his body. Shidima was stunned, horrified, and speechless. He had no idea what had just happened. Trembling with rage, he screamed about his identity, but Kannagi, fully determined, replied coldly that he was the one who would surpass the founders. The mage watching asked Hinak if Kannagi would defeat the Black Magus, but even Hinak didn't know. Still, Hinak was certain that